the 8th video in this series, and I just want to point out something quite interesting. So let's take a scenario where a quite common scenario, right? So we can ask the question of, so here's the question, right? If we start with a product that's break even on the front end, why do I say that that's equal to $500,000 in profit, right? So it seems like I'm making a bold statement, right? It seems unrealistic. Okay, and let me explain why it's not. Why it's not. Instead, why we can be certain that having a situation where we have a break-even product on the front end, it's equal to $500,000 in profit. Okay, so here is the proof. Right? So this sort of video kind of like is meant to basically show the importance of being in this sort of situation. Okay, so we're going to take a realistic example that was quite easily achievable. So the product was a mini vacuum cleaner, portable mini vacuum cleaner. The COGS were around $7. The cost per purchase was around $30. Actually, it was around $35. So the selling price, in order for the situation to be break even, was 35 plus 7, which is $42. So we imagine that this is the scenario that we're in. And now I'm going to show how this is basically equivalent to $500,000 in profit, and why generally people don't think this way, right? It's easily dismissible, such a scenario. And I'm going to show why it's very important to value such a easily achievable, ubiquitous, seemingly mediocre scenario. Okay, so here's why. So we can say COGS plus CPP. Okay. Now, remember how I said that just by implementing the abandonment cart, right, we are lowering the CPP by 25%, like virtually lowering it by 25%. And then when we implement Facebook retargeting, we are also lowering the CPP by an extra 25% of the original CPP, right? So it's not a multiplication, is cumulative, right? So in total, just by doing those two things, we have effectively lowered the CPP by 50%. Okay. What else? What else is happening for the CPP? Well, we were talking in the last videos about all of those, we were talking about implementing product frames. So this is basically the increasing of the conversion rate aspect. So we have this going on in our favor, right, on top of the break-even situation. So this is the original situation right here, and then we have, right, and then we have 1, and then we have 2, and then we have 3. So I'm going to cluster everything as increasing the conversion rate, which includes implementing product frames, which includes, so I'm going to say here, implementing product frames that weren't there already by default. Actually implementing important product frames, right? And I talked about in other videos how those particular product frames will have an impact on the conversion rate. And then implementing important seller frames that weren't there by default, and then implementing important rationality distorting frames that weren't there, right? So here we have scarcity, urgency, and anchoring the price. What else? Implementing guarantees that weren't there by default. Right. So what else did we talk about? In terms of frames, that's it. Right. Now there are the split tests. So apart from implementing the frames, we have improving the ad, improving the targeting, improving the bidding strategy plus bid, improving the daily budget sweet spot of Facebook. Oh, right. Implementing a marketing angle to draw the attention of people that see the site for the first time, right? So this also has an impact on the conversion rate. Right. Now, there is this notion of irreducible complexity versus reducible simplicity. So, right. So irreducible complexity versus reducible simplicity. So I'm going to draw it. Usually, this is irreducible complexity. So what people do is they say, okay, I'm going to do step 1 and hopefully it works. Then I'm going to do step 2 and hopefully it works. Then I'm going to do step 3 and so on, right? Until I get a result. The problem with this approach is that each of those steps has to work in order for the result to be achieved. Now, if there's a 90% chance that step 1 will work, which is quite high, right? And 95% that this will work, and 100% that this will work, and let's say 60% that this will work. And at some point, 80% that something will work, and 100% that another steps will work, right? And 70% that another one will work, right? So somebody would say, oh, I'm quite confident that I'm going to achieve those steps, right? Because it seems like a bunch of steps are 100% work, and there are just some steps that are quite tricky, but overall it seems like it might work, right? So here's what happens if we multiply the probability of each of those steps. So if we have 90%, that's basically 0.9, right? If we multiply with 70%, which is 0.7, if we multiply with 60%, which is 0.6, if we multiply with 80%, which is 0.8, and if all of those other steps are 100%, okay, we got a probability of achieving a result of 30%, right? So in 2 times out of 3, we will fail. And it's not like we are repeating the same thing 3 times and 1 time it will work. It's kind of like, right, if a process or a business model or whatever has a series of steps and the probability of it working is 30%, there would be like a whole period of time wasted just because the probability of failure is 70%. Okay, so how do we get away from this common situation that everybody uses? Well, we got the notion of reducible simplicity, right? So reducible simplicity is like this. We want to arrive at a certain threshold, right? So we call this threshold 1. And in order to arrive at this threshold, which is to get the context in our favor, so for example, let's say that there is a business meeting, and some people, and you know, it's important to make a good impression, okay? And there are a lot of spectacular videos on the internet of how to do this, but this is sort of like this common approach, which is romanticized, and it requires a seemingly spectacular approach to make it work. And you know, good movies are made based on this, and people are being pat on the back that they were so smart and sharp and whatever, right? But this only works in movies, and it's quite inconsistent, and there's a bunch of luck involved, right? We want to be strategic about this, right? So what we do is we get contexts in our favor. So what would be a threshold that we can fix, that we can pass, So basically, what's a context that we can pull in our favor in order to achieve the result of, let's say, being impressive in a particular business meeting, right? So what we do is we think that, okay, if we are dressed in a very nice way, that's better than not being dressed in a good way, okay? So now we can think about a bunch of different outfits, and only one has to be the one that we have validated to be good, right? So it's like we pick up 10 different outfits and maybe we seek feedback from other people to tell us that one of them is good, right? So only one has to be good in order to pass this particular threshold. And now we are here, dressed well. And we failed with a bunch of imaginary items, like a bunch of times. We can fail 100 times. Only one of them has to succeed to pass us over the threshold. And now we have a threshold 2, right? Now let's say that threshold 2 is, well, in order to impress that somebody, we might want to get into the context of them believing that we have the same system of values as them, right? So what we do when we talk to them is like we say certain things that, again, we want to achieve we want to be perceived as having the same value system as them, right? So we try a bunch of approaches and only one has to work, and now we are in a context where they perceive us as being dressed well and that we have the same system of values as them. And then we think, okay, what's the next context that, okay, we want to be perceived in, right? Let's say that it's important to be perceived as being intelligent, right? So we say a bunch of stories and they are indifferent, it doesn't really work, but a particular story makes them say, oh my God, you're actually intelligent, right? So now we are in this situation where we are perceived as being dressed well. We are perceived as being like them. We are perceived as being intelligent, right? So you see how we get all of those things in our favor in a very reliable way, and then at some point we have so many good things in our favor that just grabbing the result that we want is so easy, and it's not spectacular at all. It's like we simply ask for it and they say yes, right? But what we did is we build to get there, right? Sort of like if somebody asks, how can you see the sunset, and you're in a particular building without a straight way to see the sunset, right? So if somebody has the wrong approach, they might sit on their sofa and they might think, how can I make this telescope that I can use to see the sunset, right? And it might be spectacular and whatever, right? And people might be impressed. However, somebody else might say, well, maybe I'm not in the right context. Maybe I need to go outside. So now you're outside instead of being in the building that's limiting your options, right? So now you're outside, but you still don't see the sunset. But now because you're outside, you can move. Whereas if you're in the apartment, you're confined by the space of the apartment. So now that you're outside, you can move around and you can pick locations that are higher, like a hill or whatever, a place without buildings. So now you go there, and now you're in a context that you build on the other context of being outside, where you simply raise your head and you see the sunset. So basically, getting the result is extremely easy. Getting any result is extremely easy, as long as you have the proper stack of contexts in your favor, right? So let's say that $1 billion is extremely easy to get as long as one has the proper context in their favor. So let me give you an example. Elon Musk asked a friend for $1 billion and he got $1 billion in however 5 minutes or whatever. So getting the $1 billion is extremely easy. But in order to get that, as I said, one has to have the proper context, right? So Elon Musk is in a context and he got a particular friend, which is having a particular friend is a particular context. So now because he had those stacks of contexts in his favor, his action was to ask for $1 billion and he got $1 billion, right? So any result is easy as long as there is the right context. Okay, so my point is that is that when we try to achieve each one of those, right? So each one of those has a particular probability of improving the default situation, right? So we're not like, oh, we're testing a different ad and we're hoping that it's gonna be better. No, we're doing the reducible simplicity approach, which is the following. So this is the default situation, default, right? And this is the better situation or context, right? So we want to test ads, and like 100, 200, 1,000 ads might be worse than the default. Only one of them has, so you see, we might fail 99.9% of the time. Only one time has to work. So that now we have essentially improved the situation based on this tiny component, right? So now if I were to ask you, do you believe that testing 1,000 things, if only one has to work, it's pretty probable that at least one works to get into this situation, right? And this is just this, but we're going to use this approach for this, for this, for this, for this, for each one of them, right? So even if we test 100, 1,000 things for each one of them, only one of them has to work. So let's say that we are not successful in any of them apart from just one, apart from just improving the targeting. So you see why I say that it's pretty much, it's, reasonably impossible to not increase the conversion rate, given that we use the reducible simplicity approach, right? So there are many ways in which I can explain this, but if you run through certain scenarios in your mind, you will see why this is quite genius. Okay, so I'm gonna say we are gonna succeed in improving the conversion rate so little. Let's say that we improve the conversion rate from X% to an additional 0.2%. That's it. So for example, it increases from 2% to 2.2%, right? So I'm extremely conservative. So we will take this into the mix. Right, now conversion rate, so how is conversion rate linked to cost per purchase? Okay, so let's conclude the formula. Let me give you an example. So if the conversion rate is 2%, that means that 50 people click and one buys. If the conversion rate is 2.2%, right, that means that 100 divided by 2.2, that means that 45 people click and one buys. So we are essentially saving the cost per 50 minus 45, 5 clicks. If the cost per click is an average of $1, we have essentially saved $5 here. Right. So this is free. So basically, in 1 and 2, we have essentially lowered the cost per purchase, which was $35. We have essentially lowered the cost per purchase to a virtual 35 divided by 2, 17.5. So we saved $17.5 here, for sure. And now we have also saved $5 here, and I'm very, very conservative, right? So up until now, so we have started from $0 per sale, and now we're at 17.5 plus $5. So we're at $22.5. Right? It's quite incredible, but that's the calculation. Okay, so what else we can do? Well, if we look at this picture, so we have addressed split testing, and we have addressed just the part of the infrastructure that's this and this, but we haven't addressed all of those other things, right? So all of those other things have to do with the AOV, right? So making the offer better and more expensive, putting order bumps, bundle tables, pop-up upsells, cart subscriptions, post-purchase upsells, right? So this one as well. We have seen in practice that the minimum amount of AOV we get after implementing all of those, like the bare minimum, right? So again, I'm very conservative, is so the AOV increases the selling price by 1.3 minimum, right? So now we move from a situation, so the original situation was selling price is equal to COGS plus CPP, okay? Right, and now we have an additional, after implementing the AOV, we have an additional 0.3 multiplied by selling price minus the additional COGS that are involved in the AOV, right? So also since right, it's more like 0.3 is multiplied here as well, because only an extra 0.3 by the additional COGS, right? So in a sense, what we aim for is COGS that are in between $5 to $15, right? So if we divide that by 3, essentially that's 5 divided by 3, that's 1.6. So this is basically so additional COGS are basically between 1.3 to 15 divided by 3, which is 5, sort of like this, right? Now if the selling price is we have the selling price here, $42, right? So what is $42 multiplied by 0.3? Right, so it says it's $12.6, right? So if we take $12.6 and we minus $5, we got $7.6, right? Right. So we have essentially added an extra $7.6 minimum by implementing this part, right? So we have addressed this, and this. We haven't addressed the Brin's email software, which is quite genius, and it will lower the cost per purchase by a half again, but this is pretty advanced. It's for later. We haven't addressed split testing prices, so that's another thing that we can use. We have addressed this. We haven't addressed making the product pictures better with a designer, right? So I have only talked about some easy things, and I've also talked about those frames. Right, so without talking about the advanced stuff, we have taken a situation, any situation that's breaking even, to now making us, just by implementing all this stuff, right? That's approximately $30. So we are making $30 per sale with all this infrastructure and tests and whatever. Okay, and let me add something else, which is selling the store. So essentially we can well, what is it with the smartwatch? So the profit was 300K, let's say, and people were offering 200K easily, but it was quite a young store. It was 6 months old, right? It was 6 months old. Right. and it wasn't really branded, and there were a bunch of things that could have been improved. So my point is that if we take this case study and generalize it, we can squeeze an extra 3 divided by 2, which is a 1.5, so multiple. So if we take the $30 profit and we multiply it by 1.5, we're at $45 profit per sale, just because we are selling the store. Okay. And there are other things that could be in place to make it even better. So even if I'm wrong in half of the things that I've said here, which I took every single thing, and it's quite logical that this is going to be the case. But if we say that I'm wrong for whatever reason, and it's not $45, it's, let's say, $25 profit per sale, and we know that the saturation rate in America is definitely over 15,000 units, right? The smartwatch was sold for 18,000, I think, or 17,000, and it was in a market where everybody was selling it, right? And retrospectively, we could have done a much better job. Here's what's interesting. Evren was telling me that he's been scaling a bunch of products in Romania, and Romania has a audience of Romania has an audience of 10 million people, right? And the saturation rate was 10K per winner, right? USA has an audience of, well, excluding desktop and excluding a bunch of placements and all of that, let's say it's 200 million, right? Now let's say that it's 100 million per gender, right? So that would result, and bear in mind that America has a much higher conversion rate, like more people buy online than Romanians, right? So that would result in a 100K saturation rate per product. So that's why I'm saying I'm extremely conservative to say, oh yeah, let's just say that's 15K saturation rate, and let ourselves be surprised, right? However, this is just Facebook and this is just America. If we scale a winner in other countries, we can double this saturation rate. But let me be extremely conservative again, and let's say that we raise it up from 15K to 20K. And then we got multiple platforms. We got TikTok as well. So again, let's be extremely conservative, and let's say that in America and in all of those other countries, the only thing that we will be able to do is to increase it from 20K to 25K saturation rate, right? So with scaling it across multiple countries, with expanding to TikTok, we're now looking at a saturation rate of 25K, right? And with my conservative estimate of $45, and then with an extra conservative input where it results in $25 per sale, now we have 25,000 orders multiplied by $25 per sale. So now we're looking at $625,000 in pure profit. And I was extremely conservative in a bunch of ways, right? So this is my analysis to show how if we start with a product that's break-even on the front end, it's pretty clear that by doing all of those things and being extremely conservative over and over and over again, we are going to reach at the minimum more than $500,000 in profit. And that's why it's very important to value this point. And that's why whenever I see this situation, I'm like, we don't need to think about anything else. This is it. It just requires work. Just requires the work, right? So I thought that would be a very important, video to put things into perspective.